What's up? What's up? What's up, everyone? It's your boy Nick P, and I want to welcome you to another meeting of the How to Be an Anti-Racist Book Club. I am your boy Nick P.
And it's your boy Rev Kev. I'm here to engage, inform, and inspire. And if you came to do that, then I'm preaching to the choir. Hey, hey, hey.
That's what's up. I'm still pulling up um, some information that we're going to be talking about this evening, but I wanted to have the honor and the pleasure of introducing someone who has been coming to our book club meetings. It seems like every book club meeting, right?
Mhm.
Um, but he now is coming on in a new capacity. This is my friend. You all know him. I am presenting him to some, but presenting him to others. This is my brother, Rev Kev. He is now a co facilitator. And if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself in case somebody is here for the first time.
All right. I'm Reverend Kevin Kosh Jr. I'm the campus pastor and Wesley Foundation director for the I Love Jackson State University. I've been doing campus ministry with HBCUs for going on close to 10 years now. So, yeah, I love social justice. I love putting my faith in action. I hail from St. Louis, Missouri. So, shout out the Midwest. Um, and I love doing the work of justice, racial reconciliation, and making communities better.
That is amazing. We actually had the pleasure of meeting. We're both. I'm still a student. I'm a senior at Gammon Theological Seminary, but Rev Kev is an alum. So I honor you as an alum of Mother Gammon, and
Appreciate it.
I appreciate all that Gammon has given us and has exposed us to, and has taught us about culture, about faith, and about applying correlating culture and faith and seeing them as working together. But I wanted to just do some housekeeping and do some shout outs. I want to shout out to my home, my mother um, church, which is St. Luke United Methodist Church in Augusta, Georgia, where the Luther B. Felder, Reverend Dr. Luther B. Felder, is pastor.
All right, and big shout out to Dr. Felder because he was actually the chaplain for Russ College when I was a student there. So that's one of my mentors, big time mentors right there. So
Oh,
Dr. Felder, love you, man. You really inspire and inform and engage. Because of you, I'm here. So thank you for answering your call and being faithful to it. We got to shout out Jackson State. You know, we're doing big things. We got prime time coaching, so everybody's watching Jackson State. Jackson State University. We love you. We love you. We love you. Thank you all for tuning in. Coupal United Methodist Church in Camden, Mississippi. Velma High School. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We love you. Even my local church back in the Missouri Annual Conference, who started me out when I was in high school. Beloved community. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for putting your faith in action. Because you invested in me, I would never be able to pay it back, but I promise to pay it forward. Thank you, thank you, thank you for allowing this to happen.
that's what's up. And I want to shout out also to all my partners in crime, everyone who has been a part of Adwin Media LLC, which is my media company, and everyone who's worked with me, partnered with me in productions. We just released a music video and a single this past Christmas called Worship You crossover version, featuring my boy Jay Sachs and Mike or Spike Lindsay. His name is Michael, but his artist name is Spike Lindsay. You can check out Worship You crossover version by your boy Nick P. It's NYKP, all four letters, not NYK. It's NYKP. Check me out on all music streaming platforms. And we got to give out. Can't forget, we got to give out one more shout out to our mother, Gammon Theological Seminary, and I want to thank Mo Mashakity McKenzie, Minister Mashakity McKenzie, who is our amazing technical director. She is behind the scenes right now, She's doing all the facilitating behind the scenes, but she is has been such a godsend in this process. Was there anyone from Gamma in particular that you wanted to?
Well, you said something. You said so. Yes, we got to shout out Gammon, but we can't just say Gammon. Gammon at the ITC, the Interdenominational Theological Center in the Atlanta University Center. Yo, we love ITC. Why? Because it's not just about one denomination, it's an ecumenical consortium of Black thought and theology. So it's no other place like it in the world. So shout out to Gammon and big shout out to the ITC. It's the only place like it in the world, baby.
That I'm over here rolling like, because I'm just seeing the whole like, so all the energy, all the ITC energy and vibe, it's all like I just gotta cherish it from memories because it's COVID and the social distancing stuff. It's for the birds. Like, I just want to get back to that ITC culture where we have all the various denominational constituents here. In case you don't know what the ITC is, it is the Interdenominational Theological Center. We are the home of 5 denominational constituents, and we have a non-denominational constituent as well. All these seminaries are part of this community called the ITC. Gammon Theological Seminary is the United Methodist Seminary here at the ITC. So, yes, shout out to the whole ITC family. Also, our viewers, I want you to feel welcome. Let us know where you're from in the comments. Let us know how many times you've been here. If you're from Jackson State, if you're from my alma mater, Payne College, if you're from St. Luke, what's some other churches and places that people could be from?
Yeah, you might be from Russ College. You might be from Alcorn State University. You might be from Mississippi Valley State. You might be from Philander Smith. You might be from Bennett. You might be from Claflin. You might be from Wiley. If you're
Call
from
them
any of
out.
these places, any of the Black college from schools, you might be a member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. You might be a alpha, a sigma, a zeta, a delta, a sigma, gamma, rho, a iota. If you are part of the D9, stand up. We are here. We're here to put our faith in action and to address some serious critical issues.
That's some crazy energy, my brother. I'm a facilitator and I felt welcome. I felt welcome myself.
Right. We need the DJ to do some bomb drops.
Yeah, we definitely need a good DJ. We need some DJ sound effects. But if you can share your comments, your feedback. If you want to put some bomb emojis, some fire, some flame emojis, whatever, we want you to feel welcome. Feel free to engage. If you have any questions, if you disagree, feel free to put all your comments. This It's a no judgment zone. This is a safe zone. We want everyone to feel free to express their truth and to ask questions. Hey, everyone hasn't read the book. Everyone isn't an expert. We're not experts. We're learning from How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, who is the leading anti-racist scholar in the nation. So he coined the term. So he's the leading one. So yep, that's the one where, oh, here it is right here. Yeah, right here. That's the one. That's the one. But so we're gonna go into our Sankofa moment. This is, like I said, this is a unique episode or a unique meeting. Yes, sir. The Sankofa bird. Sankofa it's called an Adinkra symbol. A Adinkra symbol. It is a West African symbol. Many of them. It's a whole system of them, and each symbol represents a different African concept. Sankofa is actually a concept that has 2 different symbols. It has like this little heart looking thing, and it also has a bird that is fetching, I believe it's a seed, while it's moving forward. It goes back and it fetches the seed, but it's still walking forward. That principle represents going back and fetching it, something that's important to you, whether it be heritage, a moment where God has moved in your life, a moment where you've learned and you take that life lesson with you while you're still moving forward. And so we're calling this section from now on where we are going back and kind of gleaning the knowledge from previous chapters really quickly. We're calling that our Sankofa moment. And our genius facilitator, Red Cap, he's going to take us through chapters 1 through 6 and our Sankofa moment. All right, take us away, my brother.
All right. So the Sankofa moment, going through 1 all the way to where we are now, 1 through 6. In case you haven't read it, this is a brief catch up. The first chapter of this book dealt with definitions. Exactly how are we dealing and identifying with this whole term racism? We might have many different perspectives or experiences with racism. In chapter 1, the author takes the time to actually define what it is to be racist and what it means to be anti-racist. So we're just dealing with the definitions to lay the groundwork in the first chapter. If you are wondering what is a racist or what is an anti-racist by Dr. Ibram Kendi, this is what he has to say in chapter 1 as a highlight. What is a racist? One who is supporting a racist policy through their actions or inaction or expressing a racist idea. So what is an anti-racist? An anti-racist is one who is supporting an anti-racist policy through their actions or expressing an anti-racist idea. The next chapter deals with this whole concept of dual consciousness. And so dual consciousness, Dr. Ibram is actually doing a Sankofa moment and pulling from W.E.B. Du Bois's work from having what was it?
Double consciousness.
The what
Souls
was
of
it?
Black folk.
It was, yeah, pulling from the souls of black folk from W.E.B. Du Bois, and also talk because he also kind of talks about this double consciousness that people have to live in, black people have to live into. So chapter 2 is dealing with this dual consciousness, and he talks about assimilating, segregating, and then being an anti-racist in the midst of the assimilation that happens and this segregation that happens. Then number 3 is a big chapter. It's dealing with power and the breakdown of power. And he talks about various experiences, but he breaks down this concept of power. Because when we look at racism, racism is about power because it helps dictate who gets what, where, how, and why. And so he breaks down this concept of power. And then number 4, chapter 4 is all about biology, the makeup of who we are. Because if we're going to talk about racism, sometimes somebody just doesn't like you because of the color of your skin or the texture of your hair, the hue of your skin. And so breaking down like biology so that we can see that at the end of the day, God used the same dirt to make mankind, humankind. Let's use that inclusive language. And then chapter 5 dealt with ethnicity ethnicity. And ethnicity can be seen as, how do we identify somebody because of those physical attributes, like that a community of people they might have in common with one another. I'm excited if you all can't tell, so let me breathe a
Oh no,
little
you're
bit.
doing good, brother. You're doing good. You're doing good.
But yeah, so number 5, chapter 5 dealt with ethnicity. So what exactly is our makeup and how does that play into race? And then number 6 deal with the body. It dealt with the body. How does your presence impact a particular place? Which goes back into ethnicity and biology, which affects our racist or anti-racist ideas, which influence our power, which dictate how we have to wear a mask or flip a switch, code switch with the dual consciousness. But it goes back to the definition that he sets for us. What is it to be a racist? To support racist policies or to not do anything and let those racist policies persist or express racist ideas. And we're talking about how to be an anti-racist. We're going to be talking about how do we support policies that are anti-racist, and how do we also unpack those racist ideas while expressing anti-racist ones, which leads us into chapter 7. After we talked about ethnicity and the body, we're going to talk about culture. Chapter 7 is all about culture. For the culture.
That was amazing. So now you see why you have to tune in every week, because we have gone along a journey, and we still have a quite a long way to go. But we are now on chapter 7, called culture, which I think resonates especially with a lot of Black youth. They young people may find this section especially resonating. So if you are maybe a youth pastor, or you're a professor, a college professor, or teacher, this section, I'm reading chapter 7. It's a short chapter. It may give you some insight to um, culture and a lot of what he's talking about. So again, he begins with defining key terms. The first key terms that he defines, and Rev Kev, you feel free to just jump in, brother. We just flowing. So he starts with defining cultural racist, and this is how he defines it on page. In case you're following along, it's page 81. Um, and he writes, one who is creating a cultural standard and imposing a cultural hierarchy among racial groups. Um, then he defines cultural anti racist, one who is rejecting cultural standards, not, just being okay with it, or not abiding by, but one who is rejecting cultural standards and equalizing cultural differences among racial groups. This reminds me a lot of when we talk about the term multiculturalism, and multiculturalism isn't just about having people who have different skin in the same room, or hiring a Black person on your staff. It's about actually rejecting cultural standards. So saying that you have to, whatever we do here, or how we do things, has to be your standard. When you are a cultural anti-racist, you must give some human flexibility for people to bring their cultural nuances and their nuances as human beings, because we're not robots made in a cloud, made in a cloud factory in heaven. We all bring culture and personhood, and a cultural anti-racist is one who willfully rejects cultural standards and equalizes cultural differences among racial groups.
And there's a quote by the Mexican American Cesar Chavez that said, "Preservation of one's own culture does not require discontempt or disrespect, contempt or disrespect of another culture." And so, yes, you can have your culture and you can have your standard, but your standard should not impede, disrespect, or disaffirm the humanity and culture that somebody else is also bringing to a space.
That is absolutely correct. And and often what that looks like, it's not. I think what we do is we think that it's an overt. We're looking for, speak English. Like we're looking for those overt racist comments, but that's not always how cultural racism appears. Sometimes it's merely when someone is different, comes into the workspace, and maybe they're having a difficult time because of cultural differences, and when we kind of shun, kind of be silent or shun them out, or give them a cold shoulder, or not offering, not taking action, being an anti-racist and taking action to help um, make the transition from that cross-cultural, making that person or allowing that person to cross into a different culture, that transition a little smoother, we're actually not doing the work of anti-racism. We're you just being silent, you're just watching people, it's kind of like the kid in high school when they drop um their lunch tray all over the cafeteria, and you just, everyone either laughs or somebody may just look at them and just, turn their head. That neither one of them is helpful. And I think that's what we do in society. We may not overtly laugh or do those overt racist comments, but sometimes we turn a blind eye. Sometimes we're not accommodating. Sometimes we even offer what the person should do differently without necessarily being a progenitor of solutions for that person. That's what anti-racism is.
And I think that this chapter in particular is important because when we talk about race, a lot of times we use terms fluidly, and we don't actually like break them down and let them have their own bit of purpose. So I might be talking about ethnicity, but I'm using culture for the term to identify it. Or I might be talking about racist, but I'm actually referring to a different kind of scenario. So culture actually helps us unpack that, and then we can see the importance of also understanding what ethnicity or anything else has to do with it. Something that comes to mind is like one of the chapters talked about assimilation, and it talked about segregation, and then the work of being an anti-racist in that. Like when we do culture work, that can kind of be one of those places where we tread water, because I want to honor my culture, but I want to be inclusive, and sometimes culture can be exclusive in nature. It almost seems like at times. And so we're trying to do this unpacking work. And then when you look at just the statistics of the church, like so, let's look at the United Methodist Church, since we're both graduates of Gammon. Over 90% of the Methodist Church is white. In Mississippi, we have several black churches, right? And so we might have scholars, theologians, and pastors who take classes or attend schools that have a black theology. But then when we lead our churches, a lot of times we might have a European liturgy. And so that this whole culture and being able to identify that, because yes, I'm a part of this system. And yes, I'm a part of this community. And yes, I sit at these tables and we don't see color, but it's diverse now. But part of when we don't see color, the part that we miss is also the culture. Because you saying you don't see culture and you're treating me the same, that's perfectly fine. But we also have to take into consideration the assumptions that we're making, or the things that we're missing by not allowing Christ to touch our eyes and allow us to see what's going on. Because there are a lot of times people are living in this dual consciousness. Women are living in this dual consciousness. Many people in our pews or in our pulpits are living this dual consciousness to uphold a culture that did not make room for their being. But they're still in these spaces. And because they're in these spaces, that's why we have to do the work of speaking to this and unpacking this stuff.
And at ITC, we call that culture work and being a progenitor of solutions and offering that laying that pavement for cross cultural um, conversations. And we call that being a prophetic problem solver here at the ITC. And in order to be a prophetic problem solver, we got to first define, we can even take a step back and we can define culture. Because I know that's a term, just like how you brilliantly said, my brother. We often throw that term around. Here at the ITC, we have a degree called the Master of Arts in Liturgical Arts and Culture, which is one of my programs. And one way that I have learned that you can define culture loosely is the way that people live. So that is embedded in so many aspects of our lives. So when we're talking about race, we have to be clear. Race is talking about color. Ethnicity is talking about genetic, like our places of origin, like the countries where our places of origin genetically come from. Culture is talking about the way we live. So there's so many layers and different categories, but we have to make sure that culture, when we're talking about culture, we're not just taking for granted that when you hire someone who's brown, that you've done multiculturalism. No, multiculturalism is engaging also how they live. So if they're not being able to bring components of their lived experiences with them, if we're not talking about their lived experiences, if we're talking about how they're not being able to, if we're talking about the walls that we build, building walls that makes it difficult for people to bring their culture and their lived experiences with them, they just have to kind of be there and exist. That's why inclusion is kind of a weighty issue. We include the bodies, the people there, but we don't include their personhood. So we how we do that is we engage human beings. That's often why we like to do something for Black History Month, but we don't like to do anything else beyond that. We may go to a community for a Black Lives Matter march, but we never visit that community ever again. We're not patronizing their businesses. We're not funding their institutions. We're not having relationships with people. Not just throwing money there, but having relationships with people, understanding their lived context. That's when you engage culture.
Yeah, and when I think about culture, it's like we have like the creation. This is what God already God already built, right? And so some things are inherent as being fearfully and wonderfully made in God's own image. But then culture is kind of what humans take and build on that creation, like what you're saying. So how do we live? So it's our language, it's our habits, it's our ideas and beliefs, it's our customs, it's our social organizations, it's our our artifacts, because different cultures have these things that are very special
That
no matter
Sankofa
where you go.
bird.
The Sankofa bird, right? It's the technical processes. So how do you process and go through things? Like, what's the protocol? Cultures have that, but then it's also the values. And culture is something that, like, even church has its own culture. And regardless of race, one of the things that the church is constantly called out on is we have an espoused value that says come as you are, but our culture is not always in line with that value that we say you should come as. And
Watch
people
it.
recognize that and they push back at it because it's like maybe you need to change how you're expressing your value, or you need to recognize that these things don't line up because you're saying that they are. But my experiences, the statistics, and my observation consistently tell me otherwise.
That the what you just said about statistics, now that's powerful. I'm gonna say something about that, but I want to acknowledge. Hey, Christy. She says, as white Christians, I think we place a lot of value on loving the person, but not the culture. Failing to realize that a person's culture is deeply embedded in who they are. That is so true. And then I even want to write an extra I guess claim with you, Christy. I would question if we then really love the person, or do we kind of love this misunderstanding of who the person is to us, or who we may want the person to be. If we don't really love their culture or seek to know, because there is this. I'm gonna say this thing, and then I'm gonna say the statistics, and then I'm gonna let you talk for the bit. So there's this thing called cultural humility versus cultural competence. So cultural humility is when we take a position to seek to be on a lifelong process of learning. we never become competent in a human being, like statistics, or like I can 1 + 1 = 2. So now I understand how that works. People aren't math formulas. Just when you equate or you figure out a formula, people aren't like that. People change. People are always evolving. They're growing. They're changing. We don't like to use the word evolving in the church, but that's really how human beings are. We change. We grow. We shift. We learn something new about God another day. Even the angels are, all the universe is learning and experiencing something new about the Creator. And such is life. It's a process of evolution and lifelong learning. Competence asserts that you become competent or you learn a fact. And now I'm more of an expert in what it's like to be um, a Brazilian, and because I know so much about Brazilian culture, so you never become competent in human beings. Culture humility takes that position, and if we don't really take that position of culture humility, do we really seek to love that person? But I made the point about the statistics because if we would be humble about the statistics and really look at what those statistics are telling us, my brother, is that if you're constantly seeing, um, if you're constantly seeing 90% this and 10% this, then that tells you something. If you, every company that wants to get a demographic, the first thing that they learn about that they try to learn is to learn about the demographic. How do we reach that demographic? So if you have a desire to reach, maybe you're having a desire to reach the youth in your congregation. So don't just try to program, try to learn about the youth in your community and your church, and you'll see a difference in that statistic. There's a reason why communities maintain a certain statistic, whether it be your church community. There's a reason you may be speaking to the culture of that particular statistic.
Yeah, and like looking at this from the academy perspective, right? Like, so theology, when we look at this idea of theology, the study of the divine, right? That is fairly new to the arena of academia. Theology is less like a little over 200 years old when it comes to being in academia. When people used to study theology, they would go into cultures and they would they would impose their views on what they were seeing onto that culture. So if my culture tells me that this is heathen or this is demonic or this is primitive, I'm going to go in with this lens that says the same thing, and that's what's going to get disseminated. So everybody who reads my research, that's what they're going to experience when they come into contact with this culture. Now, but there has been a shift in how we do this cultural study. So before I can just talk about a culture, and I acknowledge my bias, but I have to understand the culture and the terms and the things by how the people, the practitioners, understand it, and not just how I feel or think or my observations. Because if I don't do that, then I really don't understand the culture. I love what Christy is saying. Like we say come as you are, as long as it doesn't make us feel uncomfortable. And
Facts.
sometimes being in somebody else's culture makes you feel uncomfortable because you're not in the know. You have to take that back seat and just watch. And we don't actually often. Sometimes we struggle to use listening and observation as an evangelism tool.
Mm.
Me allowing you to be and me allowing you to teach me something, regardless of what I think, what I believe, but I allow your presence to be there. That ministry happens in those places. When we look at all the miracles that Jesus performed, a lot of times, like dealing with this whole uncomfortable business, a lot of times Jesus did miracles when times were uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine being a bride and then the party is getting messed up and all the money has been paid.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever set up a wedding, there's a term called bridezilla. Jesus saved the day because it was a groom somewhere like, oh no, I done messed up. People were hungry and they didn't have a budget to feed people.
Right.
There were blind people that the world did not want to touch, the community didn't want to touch. He spoke to this tension, and a lot of times we want our faith to just comfort us. But healing is not always comfortable.
It is not.
And so we have to be used to getting uncomfortable, because in Luke, Jesus heals a blind man. He spits on the ground. He puts it on the man's face. And then he says, "Can you see?" And the man says, "I can see, but the people look like trees." Then he puts some more dirt on this man's face. And then he could see. And then he told him, "Don't even go home, but don't go back through the village." A lot of times we walk around with a blind faith. I don't know what God is going to do, but I know God is good all the time, and all the time God is good. But when we come into relationship with Christ, having a blind faith might be where we start, but being in relationship, things will become clearer. We see through the mirror dimly, but soon we will see things clearer. But guess what? Just because Jesus touches us and we are healed doesn't mean that it's over, right? I got saved. I go to church now. I took these classes. I have black friends. I'm married to a white person. I have mixed grandkids. The man could not see. And Jesus had to touch him again. As the church, as believers, we got to come to Christ time and time again. And we got to be authentic, because the church, sometimes we're missing the mark. And we have to be comfortable to say, "I don't know." Because I serve a living God. I read a living word. And guess what? This is a living culture that I'm a part of. And sometimes I can't see clearly, even though Jesus touched me. John Wesley called this sanctifying grace. This was the whole concept of social holiness. When we talk about the means of grace and we talk about holy conferencing, come on, we can't just be studying this stuff to get ordained. We got to live it. Culture doing this work, and we come back to Christ time and time again, because sometimes we might have missed something. There's also a story in Luke where Jesus heals not 10 lepers, but one comes back. And sometimes we have to be the ones who come back, not because we want anything, but to say thank you. Some people are just coming to get a perspective. Some people are just coming to be healed. Some people are just coming to be fed. But as the church, if faith is what makes us whole, we got to come back and be faithful just to say thank you. I have to come back and say, "What's up, Nick P? I appreciate the work that you're doing. What up, St. Luke? I appreciate the work you're doing. What up, Jackson State? I appreciate the work you're doing." Because when that leper came back, this is what Jesus had to say. He said, "It was 9 people that I healed, was it not? And only one came back." And he looked at him and he said, "Your faith has made you well." Be the one that comes back, so you don't just have a faith that comforts you, but you have a faith that's practical. So that your faith ain't got to be dead, because you're putting it to work, because you're used to being in this tension. You're not just trying to have these comfortable conversations all the time. You're building relationships. And if you've been in any real relationships, you know it can get messy sometimes. You can be on somebody's nerves sometimes, but do they still respect your humanity in the midst of it?
You make a great point, because the thing is when you mentioned about when Jesus spits in the dirt and put that in. So spit and dirt. Most people would call that disgusting. I think that says a lot about how God works. Not only did Jesus spit in the dirt, but Jesus came from Nazareth. And it was believed that what good could come from Nazareth. So I think so much about the context of how God works is in uncomfortable, unfamiliar things that people would often disregard or say this is too uncomfortable or too different. I don't want to deal with something that's different. I read an article one time that was talking about the difference between multiracial and multicultural churches. And the writer was saying, I'm going to get that article, retrieve that article again. But the writer was asserting this point that I have experienced personally in worship. The writer was saying that he actually doesn't favor a multicultural framework because it is difficult to embody the multicultural framework. It is easier to embody the framework of your surrounding community. However, However, if you never invite your congregants to consider people outside of your immediate context, if you're never inviting and having community with other churches, other communities, being in contexts that you aren't only rubbing elbows with yourself, where you're not experiencing that divine spit and dirt, where God is literally spitting and putting dirt in your eyes to show you, to give you clarity, to see that it is through the uncomfortable circumstances that God is exposing a lot of our own biases.
Right.
COVID-19 is one thing that God not I'm not I would not dare say that God brought, but I believe that God is speaking in this uncomfortable circumstance to many of us. God is exposing a lot of growth opportunities, a lot of, even when it comes down to technology, a lot of opportunities for us to engage with a community that's different. A lot of us like to just say, well, we don't do Facebook because we prefer to. But what about people who need to hear the message of God, who may not be in the same context and your four walls? We build a wall, right? We build those walls, and we want to entertain spirituality, the divinity, the theology within these walls, the culture within these walls. And COVID has helped us to see that in our silos, when we don't have the opportunity to connect in the way that we did before, our silos can be death for us. Because when we have built walls that have cut us off from other human beings, guess what? When we need to connect with people, we're stuck in our silo because we weren't able to connect with people differently. We weren't willing to let Jesus spit in dirt and put that in our eyes to offer us clarity. I believe that in the foolish things, in the things that we consider most foolish and absurd, the people that we consider that they communicate in ways that are most foolish and most absurd, just like how our author talks about hip hop and the
Right. Yeah.
culture of the Ebonics, and how that word was offered, the term Ebonics was offered as opposed to another term, the what is it? What it was another word that was used. Um, Broken English is an example. And brother two, you can take it on over too in the rest of the chapter two. I'm just rambling on, but I think that what we do need to see is that how God, just like what you said, brother, the very things that we consider absurd, the how we turn our nose up on, and he mentions the culture of guys who wear baggy pants and sagging pants, and how we turn our nose up at the way certain young ladies may dress or young men may dress, and we look at that as being, well, if they just conform or if they just dress differently, God could use them. But I really think that God is speaking oftentimes, if we are willing to listen, if we're willing to let God spit in dirt and put that in your eyes, you will be able to see how you turn your nose up. And that very dirt is what you were created from. The very thing that you're turning your nose up, That's humanity. We were created from that very dirt that most of us would consider disgusting, and we God can't use that to clear our blindness. I think that God is speaking to us to embrace the difference and the uncomfortabilities of other human beings.
A lot of people ask, why am I in Mississippi? Like you could be somewhere else. Why be in Mississippi? And when I like break down what I hear when people say that to me, and even what some people have actually said, you seem to like to do like a lot of justice work and things like that. You seem kind of progressive, and Mississippi seems backwards. But when I break down that bias and dealing with this whole culture situation, when you look at the southeast of America, all these other places, like I'm from the Midwest, and then I have family up north, and it's like you feel like you're better because it's not the South. But when you talk to other people, like we got racism, but it's not like that. But in the South, there's no choice but to talk about it. And so you find that when you're actually in relationship with people, there are people who are doing this work. And they might not have all the answers, but they're building these networks, as opposed to saying, well, at least I'm not down there, because there's nowhere else to go. We have to confront it. It's like Moses in the Red Sea. It's like, okay, so I realize now that it's going to take more than just policies, but there's going to take a God move to shift this culture, because this culture is literally entrenched in everything. The author in the book, he talked about hip hop in a way like he liked music from New York, hip hop from New York. And when he listened to Southern hip hop, he was like, what is this mess?
Right.
I know I have been guilty of it. But going to undergrad and grad school in the South, you can find a word in some Gucci, man. I'm just saying. Some Yo Gotti. But you start understanding that the things that matter in one culture don't hold the same weight in another culture, because the reality is totally different. And a lot of times we bring our cultural standards to things, but we're not actually saying, how does this culture apply itself in other places? So when we look at the church and the older generation and the younger generation, there's also this cultural barrier too. There's a culture that says, well, this is how we do things and we can trust institutions and things like that. And there's statistics that also show this type of work too. If you are a baby boomer or a millennial, we have like each generation has different values that they kind of feel more inclined to deal with.
Bias too.
Yeah, we have different bias that we have. And so in all of that, are we checking that? Because yes, it was easy for you to go to school because you could go to school and have a high school degree and then get a job and then retire from that job. But now I got to move somewhere every 3 to 5 years. And it's not because I'm uncommitted, because that's just what young people are. They just uncommitted. The culture is different. So some of the values are different. Or sometimes cultures might be seeing the hurt. I see the hurt of my grandmother or this congregation, and I refuse to allow that hurt to persist without saying anything. Because I don't know if y'all are comfortable with it, but I can't be just a still voice anymore, because I've seen enough still voices, and this isn't what it should be like. Is this really what God would have for us? Or the older generation, there's an African proverb that says, the young man runs swiftly through the forest, but the old man knows the path. We're so quick to try to be innovative and transformational, but if we're not rooted in anything, we're just going in the wind. I'm not telling you this, but this is what old folks told me. I don't know what they tell you. I'm not telling you this because I'm trying to keep you from something, but I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt. And I want you to actually learn from my mistakes, because I thought the same way too. And so we talk about anti-racist work, but then there are so many different layers to this onion that can be overwhelming, and we have to be comfortable with taking those things one step at a time, because we all have fallen prey to it. Like, I might love the culture, but do we really love the people? You might love my song, but when it's time for us to vote, you love me then? Because my song was entertaining, but some of the policies that cultural bias would have says that I'm different than you. So you can be entertained by me or accompanied by me, but we can't be in leadership and partnership, true partnership together. You can be in charity work with me, but can we be in leadership and community with each other?
You make a great point, because I think I want to unpack another layer, about the biases, and even when it comes to generation, what you were saying. I think that we ultimately need to see, how every generation offers a view that we should not discredit. And I think that's what tends to happen. I think, um oftentimes younger people may discredit. I'm not saying that it's unjust or just. I'm just saying that, often young people may discredit, a lot of the moral identity of previous generations. However, what our author is offering too is how it happens both ways. And what he is offering in, on page 88, he's offering how, reinforcing of stereotypes have served as cultural racism. How people from former generations have attempted to instill cultural racism, um, into him. And what he has said was, on chapter 88. I'm going to read this little passage. I'm on on page 88, not chapter 88, page 88. He says in that little section, the first indention, he says, hip hop has had the most sophisticated vocabulary of any American musical genre. It read it read endlessly. I read endlessly its poetic text, but parents and grandparents did not see us listening to and memorizing gripping works of oral poetry and urban reporting and short stories and autobiographies and sexual boasting and adventure fantasies. They saw and still see words that would lead my mind into deviance. By reinforcing the stereotypes that long hinder blacks, that have long hindered blacks, and by teaching young blacks that a thuggish adversarial stance is the properly authentic response to a presumptively racist society, rap retards black success. Linguist John McWhorter once claimed. Two more sentences. He says, "See, Dolores Tucker campaigned against rap in the mid 1990s. You can't listen to all that language and filth without it affecting you, as if how it affects you is filth as well." So I do think that when we do not see the language of both generations as what it how he brilliantly says it is sophisticated vocabulary, as memorizing gripping works of oral poetry and urban reporting and short stories. These are the lived experiences of human beings. So every time I hear someone say that I had there was someone who was an associate of mine, and he shared a meme with it had like 5 piano keys on it, and then he shared it, and he was like, these are all the keys you need for a hip-hop song. And then somebody commented and said that you have 3 keys too many. So when you have this degrading view of somebody else's worldview, and then you hire somebody on your staff, that's not multiculturalism. Because what you are very inadvertently, very covertly, you are instilling this cultural hierarchy that I'll accept you and your black body if you leave your blackness at home and you come and assimilate to my culture because it is more superior, it is more divine, it is more Christian, it is more you are you can be a
Civilized,
contributor to society. What was that?
more civilized.
More civilized, exactly, exactly. But I'm gonna read Christy's thought, and then my brother, if you have any other closing remarks too. But Christy said, I feel like I need to do some hand raising because I just went to church. Amen to that, sister. Amen to that.
I think the portion of like of this chapter that you just read that said if you listen to hip hop music, it's filthy and it ruins your mind to a degree. I think that when we look at culture, we have to acknowledge that there is an exclusiveness to it and an inclusiveness to it. We cannot get around the fact that there is still an exclusive standard that comes with culture. The tension work comes in where we try to find that balance because we don't have all of the answers. And culture is ever changing and evolving. And so we have to be in tune with that too. And so that we can see that am I still at the end of all of this respecting somebody's humanity and lived experiences. We can't get around that fact that there will be tension. So if you were asking yourself, why should I understand culture? Like I got my culture and I get my culture from whatever news feed or social media outlet. There are a couple things on why we should study culture. There are 10 things that I'll briefly go over. One, if we study culture, we get insight into traditions. We get insight into traditions. Two, if we study culture, we can understand what cultures share. A lot of times we look at the differences, but there are many things that we share, but we might just call them different things. If we study culture, we get insight into people. Why do people do what they do, or where did this thing come from? Did somebody like this, or were people surviving and then that's a trait that still persists to this day? If we study culture, there's a tolerance and appreciation of difference that comes from actually understanding someone's culture. And all thy getting, get understanding. Wisdom is the principal thing, but get understanding, tolerance and appreciation of differences. When we study culture, there's an intellectual questioning that comes to place because we do have these social critiques. We can criticize hip hop for the language, but then when we read the Old Testament, all of a sudden nothing is bad. Like the Old Testament doesn't talk about rape or stuff that we socially don't agree with, but we have
Don't
these
even talk about Solomon, brother. Ha!
like
And his
stuff that we don't
daddy.
agree with. But how we fix it is, well, that was Bible time. That's what they did in that
Right.
culture. But did we understand the culture?
Mm-hmm.
And do we agree with it? Are we actually engaging it? When we actually study questions, culture, it invokes this intellectual questioning. When we study culture, it invites us into the everyday life of the other or ourselves. It feels good when I go back home and I love being healthy. But sometimes I go back home and culturally, boy, gotta take my shoes off. My ankles swole. But it invites us into everyday life. When we study culture, there's an appreciation for the arts, the way you play your keys, or the instruments that you use, the cadences that you sing in. All of that can be appreciated when we understand the culture that birthed it. When we study culture, there's an enriched experience of travel. I ain't even got to really travel the world myself. I can pick up a book. I can get online. And when I'm studying this culture, I have an experience that wouldn't be my regular lived experience. It's an enhanced experience. When I study culture, it gives me insight into family tradition. So going back to health, I can understand what I'm predisposed to and various things, and I can understand various other traditions on why you're doing this or why you're not doing that. When I understand culture, it helps me find myself. It helps you find yourself by providing perspective. And these are just 10 reasons on why we should study culture.
Whew, tonight has been an amazing journey. And it just alludes to why it's so important to be culturally humble and to stay on that journey of lifelong learning, because we never know everything. So join us next Thursday, same place, same time. It's me, your boy Nick P.
It's your boy Rev Kev coming to inform, engage, and inspire. And if you came to do that, then we preaching to the choir.
Next week, we're going to have chapter 8. We're going to be talking about behavior. And we're going to do some more dissecting. We're going to have another Sankofa moment. And we hope that you're willing to join us. Tell your friends, tell your family. What is it? Gazelles? Help me out with that, Chrissy. I don't know what that is. But we hope that you can join us. Invite your friends, invite your family, invite your church, invite your job, your co-workers, and let's begin this journey together of anti-racism. We love you. Peace.